Are we going? Ah, fantastic. Yeah, we had a little bit of technical difficulty over the break, but thank you everyone who helped. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about kind of rapid prototyping and how to design something for voice really fast. Oh, there is a really weird echo up here as a speaker. I'm going to try and not get interrupted by my own voice. First thing I want to say is thanks for having me here, and thank you for letting us speak in English, because I know it's many people's second languages, and I always feel really privileged that we get away with that as English speakers. Who is Clearleft? So we're one of the first UX design agencies in the UK. I'm going to tell you about some of our products in a little while. I am a UX designer, but nowadays I don't really spend so much time on the front end. I help a lot of clients like this just get better at the product strategy and coach their teams. I coach a lot of startups too. So it's really about, I guess, helping people get better at design. And I'm going to kind of show you something about that today. But bear with me, I'm going to do something a little bit different right now. So let's begin with a story. One you think you know. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there was an empire that brought peace and prosperity to many a land. The battle to bring peace was long and hard fought. Much resistance from dark forces was encountered along the way. Many lives were lost in the war for safer lands. The peoples of empire were endlessly grateful for the new order that spread throughout their towns and cities. For a short while, peace reigned and the people celebrated. But as the empire found out, peace was not as easy to maintain as it was to create. Some were not grateful for empire. A small and powerful network of rebellious scum did not believe in the new ways. They did not understand that some things must be sacrificed for security and order. The peace enjoyed by all was torn to shreds, and the people of empire begged the emperor to protect them all over again. One man had a big new idea to protect the empire and defeat the rebels. And with the support of some generals, he put his new plan into action. He created a hidden fortress, very powerful with a great many weapons. A fortress so powerful that when its power was unleashed, it would strike fear into the hearts of any rebels. But then, the evil rebels learned of this secret new fortress by devious means. They knew its design and found a weakness. And as the two forces drew close to each other, the rebels attacked, and alas, the weakness was a fatal one. The fortress was completely destroyed by a tiny band of rebels. When the emperor had recovered from the shock of losing his most powerful defense against the dark forces, he asked the generals to create an even more powerful fortress. But then, the evil rebels learned of this secret new fortress by devious means. They knew its design and found a weakness. As the two forces drew closer to each other, the rebels attacked, and alas, the weakness was a fatal one. The fortress was completely destroyed by a tiny band of rebels. This time, the consequences were dire. The empire was over. Chaos ruled the land once again. The darkness had won, and the people were sad. Many, many years later, those loyal to the old empire regrouped and began a new effort to bring peace to all the lands. They decided to build an even bigger, more powerful hidden fortress. This new fortress was 10 times bigger, 10 times more powerful than the fortresses of old. And so they imagined it was so powerful, there was no chance of being defeated. But then the evil rebels learned of this secret new fortress by devious means. They knew its design and found a weakness. As the two forces drew close to each other, the rebels attacked, and alas, the weakness was a fatal one. The fortress was completely destroyed by a tiny band of rebels. But hope is not lost, the empire is not completely gone, and we will see if, in future, they manage to build fortresses free of fatal flaws under new leadership. Thank you for indulging me in that nonsense. So, I hope I didn't spoil Star Wars for anyone too much. So what is the lesson that we can learn from George Lucas? Insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I actually don't think Einstein said that, but that's what everyone quotes it as. I don't really know where it comes from. Now I'm in Paris. I've spoken in France a few times, but you have the best words to describe this phenomenon. And it's one of those things that just doesn't translate. So for everybody who's not French, I'll teach you something about French culture, I guess. This is what it's called. Déformation professionnelle. Have I said it right? Okay. Correct me, please do, correct me. Déformation professionnelle. Oui, ça va? All right. So if all you know is how to build fortresses, that is what you will do. Now, when we encounter a new market like this, everyone scrambles to make it easy to build things. And that's what we're seeing, right? There's tons of really cool prototyping tools that I've used myself, and it's awesome. And I'm really excited. What we mustn't forget is that when it's easy to create, we start building and we forget to design. And I'm not calling anyone out on this, right? Like, I'm just as guilty of this as anyone else. Like, when these things are, when there's some new magical way, new platform for building, I'm like right in there. I'm playing with my Raspberry Pi at home, forgotten about design or what I'm making things for. I'm just as guilty of this as anyone else. But the reason I'm here today talking about déformation professionnelle is because of apps like this. So I'm not going to name it. You're laughing. You don't even know what I'm going to say. I'm not going to name the Alexa skill in question. But there is an Alexa skill that you can use to remind you to take your keys out of the house before you leave. You have to ask it to remind you when you leave. Can anyone tell me what the fatal flaw with that logic is? So for me, like, making something like that, and there's loads of skills like this, loads. My favorite was like one, oh man, I hope it's not still there. There was one where like, it was designed to help women find the right bra size with an Amazon Echo. I mean, I'm like, maybe I'm really lacking imagination. How does that even work? In a kitchen? Like, who does that in a kitchen where all the Amazon Echoes were? I'm completely lost by that one. But anyway, I'm concerned that like the emergence of voice might end up being led down the wrong path. And just to illustrate this, I'm going to play you a short clip from a film called Curious Rituals. I'll show you the clip and I'll talk about it afterwards.
Call Gerardo.
Name unknown.
Call Gerardo.
Name unknown.
Call Gerardo.
Calling Gerardo.
Hello?
Hey, Gerardo.
Okay, so that was Curious Rituals, and I cannot recommend the whole movie enough. Like, it's 20 minutes or something, but its interest is in what we call the mundane future. So think of like the Microsoft concept video for the future, right? Like using fucking graphs on your fridge or something, right? Like, no. The way the future arrives is it tends to be a little bit shit, a little bit broken. Things aren't working like perfectly right. That's the way new technology works most of the time. And the film is actually a collection of all these moments where these imagined wonderful futures are just not quite working the way we imagine them to work. And the name unknown thing, right? That was an engineer's answer to an error message. Hopefully a designer, like progressively dealing with the error in a different way, which is a good voice design practice, escalating what question you reply when the system doesn't understand. That's what hopefully a designer would do. But I don't mean to disparage engineers, because I've met loads of engineers who are great designers too. I'm talking about the mindset. So I'm going to talk about an answer I have to kind of this. And to get there, I'm just going to give you just a real quick history into some of the work that we've done at Clearleft. So in 2007, we made a tool called Silverback. Anybody used it? 1, 2, okay, well, all right, well. So at the time, in 2007, it was very expensive to usability test. You had to use a piece of software called Moray. It cost about £2,000, and it was difficult. If you wanted to do usability testing for screen apps, it was just hard. And we wanted to do it guerrilla style. We wanted anybody to be able to develop their ideas through testing in a cafe, like offer somebody a coffee and have them sit down and use your app. We wanted it to be democratized. The idea was to democratize usability testing. And the app was incredibly successful. Fair enough if you don't believe me, because hardly anyone put their hands up. But Silverback is still used by NASA. It was used by the Obama campaign. It was everywhere. Loads and loads of big corporations still use it. It's maybe not the market leader anymore, but it was an incredibly successful thing that we did. We made it cheap and easy to just actually get out there and test things. And since then, the idea of rapid prototyping has become more and more popular. If you haven't read Sprint, please do. Jake at Google, you can learn a lot about how to do rapid prototyping from this book. It's become so popular that I would argue design sprints are now being sort of fetishized as a way to do all design, which I don't think is quite right either. And then, things like paper prototyping. Wow, the images are coming out a bit low res here, apologies. And then some really mature things are happening, like in Screen World, like InVision and Marvel, both really great tools for actually trying out your ideas on a screen. And I guess John Maeder put it really well. He said, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a prototype is worth 1,000 meetings. So I kind of love that idea. Like, how quickly can you get to something that you can discuss and test? So what is the equivalent in voice UI? Actually, it goes back even before people were doing this kind of thing with screens. So I'm talking about Wizard of Oz testing, specifically developed by Jeff Kelly. I think it was Stanford on the West Coast. Any of the Americans know? Was it Stanford? Anyway, so it's called the experimenter in the loop, right? So it's a research experiment in which subjects interact with a computer system that subjects believe to be autonomous, but was actually operated by an unseen human being. And so what you do, you have somebody come in and use something which they think is responding to them, but actually there's somebody behind the scenes punching the buttons. And in terms of design input, design process, what it allows you to do is to take messy human input and iterate how the system responds. So you go in this kind of design loop, like, does the system have the right responses? Is the user finding it usable? No, okay, we'll change the script. So what are the questions behind Wizard of Oz testing? It's like, can you fool Dorothy? Does the system have the necessary responses? Can they use and understand it? What synonyms do they use? So, how many different ways do they say the same thing? And I think the most interesting thing when you're in the early stages is, what challenges have you missed? When you have an idea, you don't really understand what the real challenges are. So I was talking to somebody in a break about getting a voice system to just literally record somebody's name. That's kind of hard, and you don't necessarily know that when you start building stuff, like about how hard specifically names are to deal with. And so Jeff Kelly's goal was this: get the design 90% right before a single line of code is written. Because if you scripted it all, you know exactly how those dialogues are going to go. It's really easy to get it right. So I was in Chicago, and I was talking to a friend of mine, Abby Jones, who's a voice designer at Google, and I kind of had this weird challenge in mind. That is the actual Edward Hopper in the background, Nighthawks at the Diner. Could I go from an idea for a voice interface to a test in an hour? Like, that was the challenge I kind of set for myself. And because of the history of my company making a Silverback, we're really into kind of doing that kind of thing. So I'm going to do an incredibly foolhardy thing, like a ridiculously risky thing, and actually run a Wizard of Oz test right now. So to do this, I will need a volunteer. Anybody want to come up? It's really simple. You can't make any mistakes or do anything wrong. I just need one person to come up and interact with the system. Yes. You, madam. Thank you. Come down. Round of applause. All right. So I'm just going to switch to mirroring displays. What's your name?
Caroline.
Hello, Caroline. I'm going to give you a mic. Is that all right? Caroline, could I ask you not to look at the screen while we're doing this? And I'm going to ask you to pretend, I'm going to ask you to pretend that this can of Pringles is your Amazon Echo, right there. Okay, so here we go. So I made this tool called Say Wizard. It is literally 15 lines of Python code. And all it does is it takes lines in a text file and makes it so that the computer can read them out. So I'm going to ask you to be a user in a moment, okay? And I'm going to read you out a scenario, and then you can say whatever you like to the Amazon Echo that would complete that task, okay? All right. So you're at work. You've got a meeting in a meeting room for an hour, and you'd like to capture the audio to listen back later. Ask Alexa to do this.
Started. How long is your meeting? 1 hour. Okay. Who would you like me to send the recording to? What's your full name? Me. Thanks. Afterwards, I'll send this recording to you.
Round of applause for Caroline. Thank you so much. So you can see the script, right? That's not what I wrote first time I started imagining how this would go. This is a result of me doing these live tests. So it was much more error prone when I started the script. Let me just switch back. I know I've only got 3 minutes left. Hold on. Oh, hang on. 1 sec. Almost there. There we go. So, it's really, really dumb. It's a really, really dumb way of testing a voice interaction, but it kind of works. So let's talk about what's behind the 1 hour test. So you write some dialogue, like how you imagine things will go. You want to cover the 80%. So you don't want to cover all the scenarios, just focus on like what we call the happy path. You then just take out the human answers from your text file, and you use my tool to run your test. And then you iterate, and you keep testing and you keep iterating until that dialogue works. It's a very limited approach. There's lots of things you can't do, and there's lots of processes that I do that I've completely skipped over, right? Like, I do a lot of user research. I've just kind of said, ignore that, just do it in 1 hour. There's lots that a voice interface can do that you can't do with my prototyping tool. You can't like play ear cons or other pieces of audio. But with Anil, who's from Berlin, who's at the back there, we are thinking, and is already working on actually making it more of a formalized tool. But the method has now been used. I've taught it in a bunch of places at UX events. So people at the BBC, EDF, and at KLM have all started to use this kind of prototyping. And what I want to kind of get you into the mindset of is when we think about, building stuff, we tend to, really get into the thing. The thing is the important, having a skill out there is really important. And actually what I'd say about that is fall in love with outcomes, not outputs. It's not about having an Alexa skill. It's about something else. About, making a user really happy, or the business objective is to help them fall in love with your brand. But fall in love with finding out what people need and not what you think they need. And the way you know this is working is if it kills your early ideas, right? If design works well, your early ideas go by the wayside because you know that you're proving them wrong. And on that, if we think about some of the earlier comments, like should every org have a voice app? Well, I think it's important for every org to be trying things out in voice, but not necessarily to publish, to have a live skill if you're not finding the use cases that actually work. Sorry to disagree, Brett. If things aren't working, don't publish them. Keep working, keep designing, keep trying different use cases. So, a couple of resources for you. I wrote a long article about how to run the 1 hour test. It's called Shut the Fuck Up, Test Your Voice App in 1 hour. You can Google it or just use the short link. The tool itself is linked in there, but it's called Say Wizard. You can kind of Google that. It's really easy to use on a Mac. Another thing that I've been trying to think about for the community is collecting design guidelines and principles. So I created a mega page called Voice Guidelines, which is just tons and tons and tons of great stuff that I've collected from other places about how to design for voice. So please do go check it out, because I was getting really confused about where all the advice was. I actually run loads of workshops on this. I've been doing it all over Europe, and I promise you, this style of prototyping is way more fun than prototyping for screens. So I'd be happy to come and run this sort of stuff for teams for the day. I'll leave you with a final thought. You've had enough of my nonsense now. Ed Catmull, the founder of Pixar, wrote my favorite book about design. It's not really about design, but it kind of is. It's called Creativity, Inc. And in the book, he said, if you aren't experiencing failure, you're making a far worse mistake. You're being driven by the desire to avoid it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ben. That was very insightful and entertaining. So now, does anyone have a question for Ben before he leaves the stage? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Martin from Amsterdam. I was wondering, what's the biggest lesson you learned in voice design?
Yeah, okay, no, it's a really good question. So, in some of my other more detailed talks about voice design, I say that, our true calling is to make it fail gracefully. It's much more error-prone than any other mode of input. So, like I joke that a trackpad would never have to deal with a Scottish accent, right? Because it's so error-prone, it's our job to essentially not do the name unknown thing. And for screen designers who are used to being in control of every detail that a user experiences, that's a very hard thing to accept.